Hello, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to our 13th R&D session. Uh, Today's session is going to be dedicated to renewable energy communities. I guess you know that already, but wanted to tell you that since June we have been having these webinars, and we are very happy to do it. And you have been attending very frequently our sessions, so we are sticking with this. We are continuing here. So today's session is going to be managed by my colleague Felipe Silva, who is going to have a very nice set of guests. So we'll, as usual, we'll have some introduction presentations, and then by the end the panel discussion. And feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A tab. But well, I give the floor or the screen to my colleague Felipe Silva, and have a nice session.
So, hello everyone. First, thanks for joining this session. So, as you know, this session is on renewable energy communities, a topic that I myself and some colleagues have been working on EDP New. So, the first thing I would like to tell you is that first we could go over the renewable energy community definition, just for us to remind. So renewable energy communities are legal entities that are based on voluntary participation and are controlled by shareholders that are located nearby the renewable energy projects. So this framework from the renewable energy communities has been seen as a way across Europe to increase the decentralized renewable energy generation, and also aims primarily to benefit these shareholders instead of having financial profits. Recently, renewable energy communities topic has been a hot topic, of course, because of the ongoing transposition of the Renewable Energy Directive into the national legislations. And of course, these national legislations that have been appearing across Europe, they may not yet exist in some countries, has been leading to a lot of webinars and conversations, and this was also our motivation for today's webinar, although we will not focus so much on the regulation itself, but we'll focus more on some R&D projects, namely regarding social innovation, business models, and implementation pathway. So today's session will have this agenda that you can see in the slide. And the first thing, we'll have a small presentation about EDP New's vision on renewable energy communities. Then we'll go and see a project, an implementation project in the city of Évora. After that, we'll have some presentation on the lessons learned for renewable energy prosumers' futures across Europe. And we'll finish with a presentation on the business model adaptation for renewable energy communities called Consumer Stock Ownership Plans. At the end, we'll have this 20-minute panel discussion where you can post your questions. So if you have any question, just post them in the chat. And just a reminder that this session will aim to finish by 6:15. Without further ado, I'll present the first speaker, José Campos Costa, which is the head of the Positive Energy Community Area of EDP New. José.
Thank you very much, Philip, and good afternoon, everyone. We are honestly thrilled to have you all here with us. And like Alexandre and Philippe were saying, so please, we encourage you to fill the chat with observations, remarks, or questions, and feel free as well to contest whatever we are saying here. Just to frame a bit the area that is the background of this topic today. So positive energy communities. This is an area that is placed near the clients, near the citizens, and with that we have a mission that is twofold. So first, our goal is to explore the new trends that emerge from both the democratization and even the personalization of the energy transition. And secondly, we bet on the ones that we think will bring more value to EDP Group. And we do that by developing innovative solutions on those fields. The cornerstones that steer our work are the ones that you can see here. And today we'll only focus on one, energy communities. And yeah, one more, Philip, please. So just allow me to do a brief disclaimer, which is, as you are aware of, we are a R&D center. So our focus is to pursue some innovative avenues within the topics that we identify, and not to deliver market-ready solutions or not to commercialize solutions, but we assist on those. On energy communities, although not being technologically disruptive, there's a lot still to be comprehended and developed. And in terms of social innovation and engagement, or even the tools to manage these communities, or even the business models that can be built around them. And today we will guide you or navigate you through this travel around these topics. And scouting for those innovative avenues, we started to analyze the drivers behind the formation of energy communities, this very emergent topic. And we found in reality some intriguing facts that I will share with you. Yes, thanks, Philip. The principal reason underpinning these green initiatives is not to reduce the energy costs or other financial motives. However, they are nicely ranked, of course, it is obvious. And can you ping again, Philip, please? Yeah, that's it. But what people are most interested in is the investment in sustainable assets. So the possibility to take an active stance in the energy transition, or one could say to be a main actor instead of an extra. And inspired by these drivers, we started to build our own vision for the topic. It's not a closed issue, far from that. It's a living process, and for sure that we'll continue to feed it with a lot more questions rather than the ones that I will show you. But now let me present you a summary of this vision, what we have today. And I will start with some key takes from those drivers. And those drivers point to a scenario where ownership and even belongingness are a wished reality behind the energy communities. So we want to take control of the speed through which we are transiting to the new energy paradigm, and we want to do so collectively, at least with people that wish to run at the same speed. It might be even the case that energy communities could be a good instrument for a shift from the not in my backyard to yes in my backyard, where my backyard can be a digital space or a virtual energy wallet, so that facilitates things as well. And next one, Julie, please. All right, so now with the drivers and with this initial vision, we are able to start with the what ifs, right? And the first one is, what if energy communities being a form of capital that needs to be created, and such as stairs, elevators, or any other shared asset, what if they will bring a new form of condominiums, for which what brings people together is not only the ownership of the renewable energy assets, but also the willingness to continue to invest in other green assets? And if so, what if there's an easier way to enable that investment? Something less long and a bit more appealing and effective than the condominium meetings that we all know for sure? And if so, what if the renewable energy manager could provide that easier way? So together with the project technical assistance and even some information on the financing, mitigating two of the most common obstacles towards this type of investments. And will people like it? Will people pay for it like we pay for entities that manage condos? Maybe. And finally, our possible bets. Those gravitate around tools that reply to that what if is exercise. And the first one is a tool to manage renewable energy communities with the goal of promoting good interaction between the manager and the users. So the users can be fed with information regarding the flow of energy, regarding the information on the reduction of costs due to the energy savings, but we can also look at the social cost of carbon, for instance. And the other way around, we can have users reporting, for instance, imagine we have some dirty PV panels, and this information could be useful for the renewable energy asset to optimize the assets and to even to promote interaction between users. So here we all know the gamification topic, which can be exploited here, and also together with other sort of solutions like local energy trading and even some donation models on top of the energy that we are all saving. Besides that, to have a digital space allowing investment discussion between the users of the community and to support the decision-making power of the community as well. Let's say online voting. And of course, it doesn't have a lot of value for me to just say and place a voting and saying, look, I want to have an EV charger. We need more information to say yes or no. So the renewable energy manager again could provide or could be an help desk to assist throughout these projects, from initial technical and even financial KPIs as well, to a more elaborated plan later on, and even the financing negotiation with the banks. Example, if an entity is managing a set of different communities with new investments being prepared, will it be able to negotiate better with less risky financing conditions by grouping them? Maybe. Or even if 10 out of 15 people of a community desire to go ahead with some renovation works, aiming for a better energy efficiency, would be better to negotiate with lenders by aggregating these small interventions? Again, maybe. So again, more questions than answers, as you can see. And as a final remark, we don't have yet a portfolio of projects to do all of these, to explore all these routes. We have some, and you will be hearing one of them at least, but we are in an ideation stage, and for sure that we will be able to continue to present you with some novelties on this field. And with that, I wish you all a very good session. You are in good hands. Back to you, Philippe. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, José. Very good questions indeed. I think they are very interesting, and I think we'll get some answers to these questions during today's session. And I also believe that a lot of tools for financing and for managing energy communities will be required in the near future. So the next speaker that we'll have will be João Formiga, also from EDP-New. João Formiga is an electrical engineer with more than 8 years experience at EDP-New, and is also the site manager for Evra pilot site in Project Positive that he will present to us. João, please.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, José, for the very pertinent questions that you have addressed. For sure, there's a lot to be discussed, and for sure, there's a road ahead for us to travel. So as mentioned, I will be presenting this practical case of use of Positive, and more concretely, these renewable energy communities that we are building in Evra site. I know that we have addressed very generically Positive project in our second R&D session, but today I will try to be a bit more concrete in these specific cases of the renewable energy communities. So before I jump into the renewable energy communities solutions, let me just provide a brief context of the project for you to be properly introduced to the use cases. So Positive, as you are probably aware, is a smart cities and community project funded under the H2020 program, and basically presents these two main goals. The first one is to demonstrate in 2 lighthouse cities, Evra in Portugal and Alkmaar in the Netherlands, and partially to replicate in 6 fellow cities, Vidovre, Celje, Upest, Bari, Ioannina, and Granada. These cities spread all over Europe, basically to demonstrate in all of these cities solutions that are capable and that enable the increase of energy self-consumption, energy savings, and to have a high share of locally produced renewable energy. Obviously, we will have other technical solutions in the project, but these are the main goals that lead to the second underlying goal, which is the deployment of this set of positive energy blocks, which consists in a delimited area in which the renewable energy generation is higher than the consumption on a yearly basis. And it's located in mixed urban districts or blocks, but this project gives a special attention to the cultural heritage ones. Some key facts of the project: basically it is coordinated by us, by EDP New. It has started in October 2019 with an expected duration of 5 years, a total budget of 22.5 million, and we are a huge consortium working on the project, 46 partners from 13 different European countries. Zooming in now in every demonstration, we know that we have different challenges. So we have, let me just bring here the pointer to guide you in the map. So we have 3 of these positive energy blocks. The first one being the historical city center. The second one being the well-known Valverde village, a well-known village due to the H2020 projects that have taken place over there. And the third positive energy block is this one, the industrial area. So basically, these blocks present different challenges that address and represent the mixed urban environment that we usually face in a city. Besides the technical solutions, in Évora, we also want to improve the citizens' well-being, not only due to the technological solutions, but also with some campaigns highlighting the role of the sustainability and trying to promote a more sustainable city. As I mentioned, our special focus in the project is related to cultural and historical protected areas. So Évora represents a very good use case, since this Évora is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, or the city center is a World Heritage Site since 1986. So we have here several challenges to be addressed, and we believe that the renewable energy communities can bring some answers to these challenges. Regarding this city center, just to highlight 1 or 2 challenges that we are facing in this project, but also the city faces, is the fact that, for instance, we cannot install business as usual PV generation, so standard PV modules, we cannot do it, which brings a lot of difficulties, but also we believe some opportunities, as you will see ahead. Just to highlight 1 more challenge, which is the fact, despite the project has a total duration of 5 years, we have more or less 2 years of developments and deployment, because we need to fulfill with 2 years of monitoring. So these 5 years is not in the fact 5 years to demonstrate all the technologies or to develop the technologies. So this brings me to the renewable energy communities, or probably more accurate, the collective self-consumption solutions. These 2 terms are, at least in the Portuguese legislation, sometimes misconfused. But as I mentioned, in Évora, and in particularly in the Évora city center, we know that we have several challenges. Apart from this, the premise of the positive energy block, in which we will have a yearly generation higher than the consumption, this brings new opportunities, and we believe that opens the door to new and creative solutions. So this yearly positive balance means that we will have excess of generation in some periods that can be potentially shared with nearby buildings. And also, we believe that for the specific case of the historical city center, where we will have 8 municipal buildings to be part of the demonstrator, we believe that these buildings can play an important role establishing a collective self-consumption or a renewable energy community. We believe more on the hypothesis of the collective self-consumption, but we can go there in the Q&A session. And this can be built according to the brand new legislation here in Portugal, the 162 law, but also the regulatory framework that we have for self-consumption that was under public consultation until last January. So as I mentioned, we have these 8 municipal buildings that will be endowed with BIPV solutions, and we will create a yearly surplus or expected yearly surplus of 190 megawatt hour. The reason why we have this is because naturally it's much cheaper to install these BIPV solutions in less buildings. The fixed cost will be less, and we know that with this fact, and for instance, we will have 3 schools or with the BIPV solutions, and this is something that is important for the municipality to have the schools with some canopies to provide shadows or kindergartens, shadows for the kindergarten, sorry. We know that this will create in the end some periods where the energy surplus will be even more accentuated. For instance, during summer periods, during holidays, weekends, etc. So with this, there's an opportunity to optimize the municipality resources and to optimize these installations and share the surplus and share the energy with buildings nearby. In the end, we are creating collective self-consumption that is capable of accommodating this yearly surplus of 119 megawatt hour. The way we are doing this, so basically we have in this map on the right side of the screen, you can see with the green pins, you can see that we have the 8 buildings spread throughout the city center. Basically, there are two of the buildings are nearby the city center or nearby the city halls, which are the parking lot and Vista Alegre School. Anyhow, we have these 8 buildings, and then we have accumulated, or we are accumulating around 40 other buildings that will consume the energy that will come from these buildings. These buildings will obviously generate and consume, but as I mentioned, there will be a surplus, and we have here a pool of buildings that can accommodate this surplus. In terms of geographical distance, and we know that this is an important factor, although the Portuguese legislation doesn't specifically mention let's say, or put a threshold in terms of distance, we have taken into account that we don't want to exceed the 2 kilometers in terms of this red shape, and in terms of the distance between 2 of these, let's call it peers. Another important stream that I want to highlight over here is the fact that under these renewable energy communities, we are studying the possibility of having different energy sharing coefficients. So at EDP-New, we are developing a tool to automatize the energy sharing transition backed or being supported by Uninova. And basically what we want to claim or want to test is if these fixed or proportional sharing coefficients that the Portuguese legislation is currently guiding us to do it, and this fixed or proportional is basically locked for 12 months, which we believe it's not the best option to build a collective self-consumption. So we will basically have some side-by-side comparison, and since we will have access to online data, especially in terms of generation, we can further assess if in some periods we can change the coefficients, and also analyze in terms of paying less in terms of grid tariff in some special occasions. So this will be an ongoing work where we will be analyzing all of this variables in order to optimize the energy sharing coefficients. And just to sum or to finalize this specific renewable energy community, we also have some storage units that will be installed at the building level, not the grid level, and will be around 100 up to 130 kilowatt hour, which is nowadays being framed under the Portuguese legislation. And also we will have 3 vehicle to grid chargers, not public ones, private ones from the municipality, which will also bring additional challenges to the use case. Moving on to the second solution that we are testing in the project. This one is a bit more raw. Is a community solar farm or community solar farms up to 5 megawatts. Basically, the premise and what we want to have with this solution is to allow the citizens that live in the protected areas, that live in the historic city center, to be able to generate and consume this renewable energy. As Jose pointed out, this is now very important for us, for the citizens, to feel that they are part of the energy transition. So with this come additional challenges, which is basically to conceive a strategy capable of deploying this community solar farm according to the new legislation, and also to guarantee the attractiveness of the community solar farm business model in the sense that it's capable of engaging the citizens and that we can reach a high share of renewable energy that is then pursued or then that is owned by the citizens in the city center. On the right side, you can see that we have a very simple sketch of how this could be potentially developed. So basically, we have a developer there that licenses and builds the community solar farm. Then we have the renewable energy community consumers, or the self-consumption, the collective self-consumption consumers. It depends on how we want to frame it. And then we will have the EJAC, the entity that will be responsible to manage the citizens' energy sharing coefficients and will be responsible to communicate with the DSO, to manage the community solar farm, etc., etc. And on this, as I mentioned, this still is this solution is still a bit more raw than the previous one. But I want to highlight just 3 key facts over here, which is the fact that the community solar farm, or at least the first land in which we are indeed studying the deployment of this community solar farm, is located at around 4 kilometers of the city center, which could be a potential bottleneck, and also its location is located of around 3 kilometers of the nearby or the nearest substation. Furthermore, to reach, it's not mandatory, but the municipality wants to have the most megawatts available possible. So we are at this stage also assessing other lands to cope with these 5 megawatts. That is let's say, the value that the municipality is aiming. Furthermore, there is this viability study that is being conducted by an external entity of the consortium, in which they are characterizing both the technical aspects of this community solar farm in this location over here in green, in this field, in this land, but also the possible business models associated to the creation of this. Last solution that I want to bring, not directly related with the renewable energy community per se, but also that is now being very discussed as a mechanism that can go hand in hand with the renewable energy community, and this refers to the peer-to-peer energy trading platforms. We have a peer-to-peer trading platform that is being developed in the project by our partner Kimatica, a Greek partner. And basically, this platform presents 3 different streams. The first one is the energy transactive layer, so that will basically endow the participants to direct trading energy between the participants. And this can be made via money or tokens. And over here in the tokens part, there is also a disruptive model that we are trying to build, which is the fact that the citizens can be rewarded with some tokens via sustainable behaviors. For instance, if they use an EV car, or if they go on an e-bike instead of riding their car to a certain place, we can reward them with specific tokens. The second stream I would like to highlight is the social innovation one, in which the citizens using the transactive layer or donating money to specific campaigns, they can contribute to alleviate the energy poverty. This will be made specifically in collaboration with some local institutes like Eugênio de Almeida Foundation. This is what we are aiming to. And basically, we want to alleviate the energy poverty not only by, let's say, minimize the energy bill, but also to use the money, for instance, to change or to retrofit the windows in some social housing. So this is an important fact that we want to tackle. And the third one is the green economy, which is the creation of virtual energy wallets that we will endow the users with tokens, with the ability to invest in renewable energy projects nearby the city. Just to highlight regarding the peer-to-peer energy trading platform, we have been studying two different approaches. The first one based on the historical data, and the second one based on the future data. So to fulfill or to cope with these two approaches, we need to obviously to have the generation and the consumption in 15-minute periods, as is now being stipulated in the Portuguese legislation. And we need to guarantee that the energy generation surplus that is sold in the peer-to-peer market must be consumed within the same time frame, within the same 15-minute interval. So in the first, very briefly, regarding the historical, in the end of the month, we will screen basically the energy surpluses and the energy consumption of the citizens that want to participate in this market. And then the platform will basically provide some best options for me as a citizen that want to buy energy. The best available options are of the ones that are selling. As for the future approach, this goes a bit different. So in the beginning of the month, the producer can communicate the amount of energy he expects to have in terms of surplus, and provide a time range when this surplus will occur. The peers that want to buy would go to the market and bid for this, and basically just the platform will do the same, will screen and match the buyers and the ones that are selling. And if the producers failed, there must be some way of compensating this. Finally, just to give you an important note, I mean, the project started in October 2019. In September 2020, we screen and define all the barriers, recommendation, use cases, KPIs, etc. And we expect by the end of June 2021 to have the municipal buildings community renewable energy defined, or renewable energy community, sorry, defined and accepted by the Portuguese authorities. But also we want to establish Positive as a pilot project, and we have been liaising with the national authorities to do so, and we now expect for the new regulatory framework to be established to proceed this goal. In October 2021, we want to release the tenders for the community solar farm or farms, and we want to have the peer-to-peer energy transaction fully developed. In this purpose, to start the engagement activities towards the usage of the peer-to-peer in November 21, and by September 2022 to have the community solar farm deployed. So I reached the end of my presentation. I took a bit more than I was expecting, sorry, but please feel free to drop the questions to further debate during the roundtable. Thank you so much.
Yes, Thank you, João, for your presentation. Very interesting, this implementation of renewable energy community in the city of Évora. I think there are some questions already in the chat, but we'll leave those for the Q&A session. And now we go straight to the next presentation. The next presenter will be Rodrigo Mari Silva, which is a researcher from FCID, an institute that is part of the University of Lisbon. Rodrigo holds a PhD in geophysics and geoinformation sciences, and will give us a presentation related with a project called ProSil.
Thank you, Philip, for the introduction. I'm going to share the screen. Just give me a second. Could you confirm that you're seeing my presentation?
Yes, Rodrigo.
Okay, cool. So the title for my presentation is Lessons Learned on Living Labs for Prosumerism. And in terms of agenda, I'm going to start with a brief introduction on the ProSil project that Philip mentioned, and also on the Living Lab concept that's on the title. And later on, I'll share some of the lessons that we got to learn throughout this process and end up with a final message. Before I begin, I'd just like to share that this presentation is largely based on a specific deliverable from the ProSil project, whose authors are my colleagues Esther Marin Gonzalez and Inês Campos. And in a nutshell, ProSil is an Age 2020 project, which interestingly ended over more or less a month ago, and its name derived from Prosumers for the Energy Union. As the name points out, the main goal was to better understand the role of prosumers in the EU energy transition, as well as identify the main opportunities and challenges and barriers. The consortium was made of 10 partners from 6 different countries, and together a total of 15 living labs were pushed forward. So usually when the living lab concept is described, a bunch of fancy and catchy keywords arise, such as participatory research, bottom-up creation, or real-world laboratories. But in essence, a living lab is a project that addresses the research questions through real-life experiments and delivers or seeks to deliver actionable outputs. And to do so, there's a clear focus on gathering a diverse set of participants and actively involve them from an early stage of this process. And what I mean with early stage is really from the planning. So everyone is together and discusses and proposes from the moment the project is planned to the moment the project is evaluated in the end. To help on making this concept be even more concrete, I'm going to share a living lab example from Portugal, which is the São Luís Energy Community Living Lab. Basically, the goal here was to encourage and facilitate the setup of renewable energy communities in Alentejo, a region in the center-south of Portugal. And this living lab consisted in a set of training sessions and co-creation sessions where the technical, the legal, the financing side of prosumerism and energy communities were discussed. And from these sessions, concrete outcomes were created, such as a mapping of the existing and potential prosumer locations in the region. And here, although the picture just shows like a photo, so this was part of the exercise, but this ended with a geographical referencing. So we have actually a map, a digital map with the pinpoints of these locations, followed up by a preliminary discussion on what could be a potential renewable energy community in the village. And it's important to emphasize here that this took place between 2018 and 2021. And so this was a good part of this project was done before, for example, Portugal had transposed the directives for collective prosumerism. And when I mentioned before about actionable outputs, it means that the results of the project should engage and should enable the participants to follow up, to proceed with new projects. And this Living Lab had a perfect outcome with a local community, so which was participating on the Living Lab, proposing and submitting a project for a renewable energy community for a participatory budget. And just recently they were awarded 75,000 euros to go on with this idea. In terms of lessons learned through these Living Labs, I'm just going to present here two perspectives. I'm leaving some supplementary materials which people can read afterwards if they're interested and curious. So from the side of the participatory approach, which is the Living Lab, we clearly saw that it enables and it promotes the creation of solutions which have high acceptance, because basically they are created by taking into account the perspectives, the ideas from different stakeholders, and at the same time that this diversity is also very challenging to manage, because we have people who have different backgrounds, different expectations, different goals, and so this is indeed challenging. And in terms of the outcomes that can result from Living Labs, the general sense was that the Living Lab can empower and engage local communities by exchanging knowledge, by inspiring, by promoting networking between the different participants of one Living Lab, but also across the different Living Labs. However, and because Prozio was in fact an H2020 project from the side of the social sciences, there was a lack, so participants had the opinion that there was a lack, so it was important for there to be some funding to support their activities, and that's why in the case of São Luís, they had to go to the participatory budget to follow up with their idea. And in terms of final message, the scope, when we look at prosumerism at the EU level, because since we had the projects in different countries, we were able to get this more overall, more broader perspective, was that there's a bunch of opportunities with the ongoing transposition of the new EU directives related to clean energy and collective energy generation. But on the other side, the existing regulatory frameworks are usually very complex for example, for the civil society to understand, to analyze, and then engage. And there was also a broad general opinion that there's a lack of a framework which either supports or even enforces local government to take action when faced to these local initiatives. As I said, I'm leaving in the presentation several complementary materials which I'm not going to address here. However, I would still like to point out that there's lots of interesting materials from the Prozio website. Everything is open, from reports to webinars to infographics. And because of the different backgrounds of the research teams and the specificities of the Living Labs, they have very different nuances on what takes from the technology, on the finance, on the business, legal or societal perspectives. And while the deliverable, as a last thing, while the deliverable that I was here presenting was mostly focused on evaluating the Living Lab process, there's also another deliverable which preceded this one, which goes way into more depth in terms of the goals of Living Labs, the methodologies, the ideas that the participants have in their engagement. And with this, I conclude. I have here the set of logos for the different participants, and thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you very much. very interesting feedback on these financing challenges and also these technical challenges that affect the normal people that try to be these prosumers and don't have the technical expertise. I think that is very interesting, and we require specific business models that work for these people. And speaking of business models, the next presenter will show us a prototype business models for renewable energy communities. The presenter is Jens Lovic, which is a professor of law in the University of Viadrina in Frankfurt, and he's an expert on energy and business law. Jens is also the coordinator of the project H2020 score on consumer co-ownership in renewable energies. So Jens, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Felipe. Do you already see my screen?
We don't see the full screen version.
Okay, hold on just a second. You should see it now. Is it full screen now?
Not yet.
Maybe it takes a moment.
No.
No? Okay, I have it on full screen. I'll do it once more. Just a second, I'll share one. I'll reshare. And actually, I think I'll share my whole screen. That was the easiest. We had that yesterday. Now I remember it. Just a second. Okay, so now this should work. Do you see the full screen now?
Yes.
Okay, well, again, thank you very much, Felipe, and thank you to your colleagues for the invitation and the opportunity to speak to you today. In my presentation, I would like to introduce you to the so-called Consumer Stock Ownership Plan, the abbreviated CSEP, as a prototype for renewable energy communities under the 2018-19 Clean Energy Package. And the idea here is that, and I've seen already there were a couple of questions in the chat, that they concern the question whether renewable energy communities as a business model or as a governance model also, those that qualify under the Renewable Energy Directive, are scalable, and to what extent and how they are replicable. And that is actually also the contents of our Horizon 2020 project SCORE, which is a coordination and support action in 5 countries with 14 partners and 3 pilot projects, one in Italy, in the Piedmont region, the Susa Valley above Turin, one in the Czech Republic, the capital of the Czech Republic, actually Prague, and one in Germany, the city of Essen. And that being said, we're not only a research project, but it's applied research, and we're actually implementing these consumer stock ownership plans in these 3 projects. But consumer stock ownership plans are more a financing technique than a business model in the narrower sense. That means that we are not, if you wish, so competition, for example, to cooperatives, but we are complementary to them. And actually, as you will see, in a CSEP, you can even use a cooperative as a part of the financing scheme. That being said, let me just quickly introduce the scenario. So you are mostly, I understand, engineers and people from the technical sciences. So you're probably familiar with the idea of the energy systems of tomorrow. That is the structure, the architecture, the design. And I would like to summarize this here as the idea of renewable energy clusters. So we are witnessing a paradigm change in these technical areas, and we see that suddenly we have bidirectionality of energy flows. We have flexibility measures, storage. We have complementarity of both production in terms of the renewable energy sources, but also in terms of the load profiles of different consumers. And that actually brings me to, as you see here on the slide, to all the different actors that can be local enterprises, that can be individuals, that can be also households or institutions, municipalities, but of course also small and medium-sized businesses and large energy companies. And the question now is, against the background of the Clean Energy Package and the new rules and regulations that we see here, most importantly for our purpose and for this presentation, the Renewable Energy Directive, abbreviated RED II, the recast. So how can we accommodate these new this new architecture, this new structure, with the governance principles that the European Commission and the European Council has decided, and that are now binding law and need to be transposed into national law. And that brings me to the challenge of our SCORE project, and that is the question of transaction. So what are the contractual arrangements that mirror, on the one hand side, this new structure, and on the other hand side, this new governance models? So what I'm saying here is all these three aspects are just mirror sides of the same question, and that is, how can we foster and support renewable energy clusters in the future? Again, very, very brief, and I'll just flip through this. What are the most important innovations in the renewable energy package for us? In the Renewable Energy Directive and the Internal Electricity Market Directive. Most importantly, we have a definition of new category of actors. So individual and also jointly acting self-consumers. We've already heard that from the ProZero project. We have, of course, renewable energy communities, which we've also been introduced briefly. And we have citizen energy communities of the Internal Electricity Market Directive. So there's a definition of these actors, and you can qualify as one of these communities if you comply with the governance model. There are two other aspects that are really important, and that is, what is the benefit of qualifying as a renewable energy community? One is, or as a citizen energy community, one is, of course, you have the privilege of energy electricity sharing within the energy communities, as long as the community owns 2 metering points. And last but not least, there's an enabling framework, especially for the renewable energy communities under RED II, that supports setting up this type of entities. And this means that you have to qualify as a renewable energy community. And that brings me to the last innovation, that is the new model for control and ownership, or the governance model, that I've already mentioned. That means that these entities have to be effectively controlled by local members, more than 51% of the voting rights, and they have to be autonomous from individual shareholders, so no single shareholder can have more than 33%. And those are factors that are also determine the business models. And before walking you through the CSEP, I just want to recapitulate what we need to deliver in the next years. So this challenge is threefold. We need to provide a model for the allocation of benefits and responsibilities. And this, of course, has to ensure the provision of the critical functions of this technical infrastructure. We need to reach energy efficiency aims. So this concerns building stock. So it's about, people living there. And of course, demand side management will be very important. And last but not least, we also need to respect inclusion and energy justice. So the idea is that only when people are actually engaging and when they are included in this, then we can expect behavioral changes. So the question is, no one left behind. But at the moment, and this is important again to stress, we estimate that only 10 to 15% of the population are actually actively engaged in renewable energies or in the energy world as such. So 85% or maybe 90% are not engaged yet. And that brings me to the question of the business model. So what kind of business model is the CSEP? But before diving into the details, just one last remark on the challenge. And this is, I think this comes also results from the previous presentations. I would say the biggest challenge is to include heterogeneous co-investors under one roof. So it is not as in a typical cooperative project where all the members of the cooperative are individuals, but we see municipalities as co-investors. We see SMEs as co-investors. We see artisans, little individual businesses that all have to cooperate under one roof. And that is the largest challenge, as I would say, especially if you think about that the European new energy law does not rule out other private law initiatives. That means any large energy company can still set up an energy community with 100% ownership, so not qualifying after the Renewable Energy Directive. But this type of energy community will not benefit of electricity sharing over the public network, and it will not benefit of the enabling framework. And that means it is an opt-in mechanism. So there's a competition. And I would argue that the number of renewable energy communities set up in the next 5 or 10 years will depend on their ability to involve heterogeneous co-investors, as we see also from your pilot projects that you've presented. And the question is whether business models are attractive enough and whether they're flexible enough to enable these different partners to cooperate. And that brings me finally to the CSEP, which in essence is a trustee model. And instead of, as in the conventional participation model, where consumers directly invest in a renewable energy plant, of course, there's an operating company. Yes, there's a legal entity. But what is new here is that the participation of the individuals is not directly as shareholders in the operating company, but there's a trusteeship of some sort. So they are represented by a trustee. This trusteeship can be an individual in small projects. It can be a trust if you have trust legislation in Anglo-American countries. It can be simply a limited liability company or a professional trustee or a trusteeship entity as a limited liability company. But it could also be a cooperative in turn. But the important element is that the individuals are not shareholders here in the operating company, but that the other co-investors have one telephone number and have one interlocutor, and that is the trustee, whatever form the trusteeship takes. The fact that we are using an operating company, of course, is important for financing, for leveraging the investment. So it is the operating company that takes on the loan and not the individual consumers. And it pledges the shares of the company and the assets that the company owns, and enables, of course, other co-investors, be it municipalities or be it local investors or strategic investors, that then together invest into the CSEP operating company, which makes the investment and supplies energy as a fixed price, which the consumers or the now prosumers pay with their monthly energy bills. We also, in our concept, foresee energy efficiency measures. And these are, of course, important to reduce self-consumption in order to be able to sell, increase excess production. And this in the new renewable energy communities should or could be done within the community, which is important again for the economies of scale. Now, how does and then of course the benefits, the profits will be used to repay the bank loan. So there are 4 unique selling propositions that we have. One is that it is a low threshold investment because individuals it can be leveraged by credit. There's a low entry and exit cost for consumers because of the trusteeship. And if you think of a cooperative, this is clear, but even in a traditional trusteeship, only the partners of the trusteeship agreement would change. And it at the same time protects consumers while, and that's really important to scale these projects, while it is professionalizing decision making. So there's not 100 individuals who always have to vote, but there's one professional representative. Last but not least, the investments are also attractive for co-investors. And I think this is really important to see when we see ESCOs, when we see plant engineers, when we see also larger energy companies that want to invest in these projects. But the question, of course, given the governance criteria that we discussed, so the 51% threshold of local control and the 33% threshold, the question is how can these institutional investors or professional investors be involved? And this brings me to my last slide. That is a little bit more complex. It shows you 3 scenarios of the CSEP. So the first one is the base scenario. We have the CSEP operating company, for example, a limited liability company set up by the municipality or by the trusteeship, which runs and owns the plant. We have individuals that can be represented by the trustee limited or by a physical trustee or by a cooperative. And we have local co-investors, typically a municipality, SMEs, or participants of a cluster. These are the members of the renewable energy community in the narrower sense, and they qualify. They qualify for support under RED 2, and their investment can be financed by a bank loan, which then in a mirror loan goes to the trusteeship. and ensures that they have effective control of 51%, which leaves open, of course, the question of co-investments. And in this base scenario, strategic investors, so for example, a plant supplier or a plant engineer or an energy supplier, can acquire up to 49% of the shares. However, there's a cap of 33% of each, and these cannot be professional large-scale energy companies. However, a plant engineer who builds wind turbines could be a co-investor, which would, of course, increase the support for such projects. And this is, again, important for the NIMBY phenomenon, that people don't like to have these installations in their backyard. Now, in the scenario 2, the next level where we are scaling this, we can imagine that a strategic investor would be irritated by the bank loan, which is burdening, of course, the operating company and is benefiting mostly our local shareholders, because those are the ones who don't have the money to invest. And that is when actually we set up another entity here, just a CSEP holding, which would be a closely held limited liability corporation, which represents, again, our members of the renewable energy community, controls the operating company, which with its assets can secure the bank loan, and together with the operating company can also create a capital tax group, which means that the profits that are made here could be lowered by the financing cost of the CSEP holding. And this, of course, now with regard to investments, again, it gives a different perspective to the strategic investor. So he or she can still invest in the operating company, but his investment would not be burdened by the bank loan, which is now here in the CSEP holding. And this would, of course, largely depend on what kind of time horizon this investor has. So if it is a investor that has a short-term horizon, then this might be a better solution, because obviously for the example of the wind park and the plant engineer, I think this wouldn't be such a big problem. However, we can now again move to the last level, and that would be the level where we have investors that may have different specific investing interests. And this is where we actually not only have a holding for the local partners and the members of the renewable energy community, but where we now split the different operations in different asset companies on the one hand side. So one asset company would hold a wind turbine, for example. One asset company would be the one that holds the solar installations, the photovoltaic installations. And one could be, for example, an asset company which holds the biogas reactor in a given city. All these three then can be subjects of investments of outside investors, and the operating company could run these. And this is important because if we think again about different types of co-investors, it would be possible to delegate the balancing responsibility to an outsider that would also remain outside the renewable energy community and would not have the problem that the asset companies are effectively controlled by the holding. So this could, in theory, be a 100% daughter of a big energy company. In conclusion, this means that in the third level of the CSEP investment concept, we would have, for strategic investors, one level of investment in assets that is acquiring a minority stake in the asset companies, which could be up to 33%. Of course, if there are more investors, it could be up to 49%, but there's a cap of 33 each. But it could also be an investment in the operating company. And here, the strategic investor could own a majority stake. It could even be a 100% daughter company of a big energy company. And this is just a quick introduction, of course, to CSEP financing. And I will be available for questions, and we can also exchange later through email. Last remark that I want to say that, of course, also SCORE has a website with publications, the deliverables, and we will be very glad to share information with you. And we would also be very interested to exchange about your pilot projects. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Jens. Great presentation. It's always interesting to hear financing ways of or different financing methods to use, especially in these renewable energy communities, which is a new topic. So we now jump for the Q&A session. I will also share my screen, and we have a couple of questions in the chat. And the first one that we have is, I think partially has been replied by Jens, but we have this part of the question that says, can there be an energy system only consisting of self-sufficient or even positive energy communities in the future? And I would like maybe to ask Rodrigo, could you answer this question?
Yeah, thank you, Philip. So the first thing I'll do is run away from the word only, because that's too sure and that's too absolute. And so I'll keep on the mainly self-sufficient or positive energy communities. I believe that is possible indeed. I believe that this concept is very dynamic, as it will depend on the local context. And with this, I mean legislation, natural resources, money availability. So this will be very, very site dependent. Maybe even inside a country, it can be very site dependent. And what's important to take into account is that this positivity is not so absolute as it seems. So it doesn't mean positive all the time. And so there will be, so that it means in essence that, for example, across over a year, a given location produces more energy, more renewable energy than it consumes, but it usually implies some kind of balance throughout time. And so there will be times where, for example, my city has too much renewable energy, and possibly we can share it with the neighboring city, or at a more larger scale with the neighboring country or neighboring countries. And on the other times, we won't have as much renewable energy as we needed, and then it will be the neighbor's turn to compensate this deviation. And so I believe that, yes, it is possible, and it comes with this challenge of balancing through time and through space. Yeah, that would be my take on this.
Okay, thank you, Rodrigo. I completely agree. It's not one solution fits all, but there will be enough space for energy communities. I think even in short term, some utilities are predicting that 40% of the energy around Europe will be supplied through energy communities. So we jump to the next question. Thank you, Rodrigo. The next question we have is, how do you think that we can tackle restrict dynamic divisions of renewable energy on RECs? And should RECs be treated as a power plant with all the legislation associated to that? So, João Formiga, can you answer this question?
Yeah, thank you, Philippe, and thank you for the question. As for the first part of the question, I would like to highlight something that I presented, which was the fact that under the topic of the first renewable energy community that I presented, which was the one on the municipal buildings, we are indeed studying the possibility on a theoretical level on the first hand, the possibility of having dynamic coefficients, and with this proving that it's more efficient to have dynamic coefficients and almost real-time coefficients to avoid the deviations or the cost of the deviations. And with this, we want to basically to prove, because we consider that hybrid or dynamic coefficients are much more efficient than the fixed ones, and we want to prove that this is more effective. And with that, that's one of the reasons why we are establishing or trying to establish Positive as a pilot project, in the way that we are trying to co-create solutions under the new legislation. This has been appealing also for the Portuguese authorities, and we want to be part of this co-creation process. And I think, and I believe that most of us share this, I think that these dynamic coefficients should be the way to proceed. Obviously, this deals with other matters in terms of DSO interaction, in terms of real-time data, but yeah, I think there's technical solutions to surpass this. On the second part of the question, well, I presented also a possibility of a renewable energy community that was shaped or oriented for the Everest case, in which we cannot deploy PVs on the top of the buildings, on the top of the industries, etc., because of the constraints of the cultural heritage administration that its guidelines basically blocks this sort of implementation. So I think that this legislation here in Portugal is oriented, or probably more oriented, to condominiums, to B2B, and not sure if this REC should be treated as a power plant. I believe that the case we presented could be a specific or a very punctual case. On the other hand, the legislation on the self-consumption also brings some values or some thresholds in terms of PV capacity to be installed that it's not appealing for the PV plants, namely for more than 1 megawatt. The legal procedure is very demanding, it's very daunting, and this will basically avoid people to pursue this possibility. I had some more thoughts to share, but we have some other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, João. Good answer. So let's go to the next question, because we are running out of time. So the next question is from Berto Martins and says, why do you consider that local enterprises have better conditions compared to a global aggregation managing of different flexibility storage diagrams of the consumers that allow participation in a broader market context? And I think this question was directed at Jens. So Jens, can you give us an answer to this question?
Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously, I don't think there's one answer to this question, but what is important to keep in mind is the diversity of the activities of the potential activities of a renewable energy community. So, referring to the last question, should it be treated as an energy producer? Maybe so, but it could also be an aggregator. So I would say it really depends. Is it a business model that focuses on electricity energy sharing because it wants to exploit the difference in the load profiles? And then if you think about businesses and local businesses, of course, this becomes clear that let's say a school has a totally different load profile than a business that sells fish, or or individual households. So this really depends on the setting. I would say the message that's important here is let all flowers bloom. So there is no one size fits all. There should be room enough on the energy sector for all types of renewable energy communities. And to maybe give an example that illustrates this better, I visited a pilot project in Perth in Australia, which was entirely developer driven. It was just a block or a quarter in Perth, which was built already as an energy community. So all the condominiums would have storage, photovoltaics on the rooftops. There would be charging stations. And so people would become members of a renewable energy community de facto, not because they are enthusiasts for the energy transition, but simply because they buy their own flat. So that's a totally different approach. Whereas if you think about what I said about inclusion and the fact that 85 or 90% of the population are not involved, and that many people may not simply have the money to buy into these projects, then the approach that we see in France or also in Austria is very important or interesting. In France, the legislator has expressly stipulated that social housing projects qualify by law as a renewable energy community. So if a social housing project has renewable energies, it qualifies as a renewable energy community. And what is more important, all the people that live in the social housing projects by default become members of that renewable energy community. So they don't even decide. They can opt out. Yes, it's like, organ donation. Everybody is an organ donor, but if you don't want it, you can opt out. And that means the spectrum is so broad. We have people who have money, we have people who have no money, but for the energy transition, we need to engage the whole population. So I would say that scaling and scalability and replicability is key, but provided that these business models are flexible enough. And then, depending on which sector you're looking for and what kind of what kind of competition you were mentioning between, if I understood your question correct, it really depends where these businesses move, where they are actors. But the main challenge, as I see it always, and as I see it from my experience, professional experience, also from our pilot project, is that this requires an extra mile from all the partners. So municipalities are used to do 100% municipal projects. They are not used to have minority stakes, and they have a problem with that. Private institutions who invest are not used to be minority shareholders with others. So, this heterogeneity under one roof is a huge challenge, and that's why the business model has to be flexible, and that's why we're pursuing our CSEP approach.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think it was very clear. I hope that everyone was enlightened with these questions, everyone that posted the questions. Now I'll just thank everyone that was in here, because we already have passed the time, and I'll just pass the word to Alexander to close the session.
Yes, Philippe, thank you very much. I want to thank you all our guests that were here today with this interesting session, and also our attendees, and remind that now we are keeping this monthly pace for our R&D sessions, and so in the beginning of May we'll have another subject, another webinar, and with some surprises. So keep informed, and thank you very much, and see you again around. Bye bye.